Hello and welcome to the Undermind, a podcast about brute war AI development. My name is Shonko, your host from makingcomputerdothings.com. Let us begin. Welcome to the 19th episode of the Undermind podcast. This week I will have a Zerg themed podcast with Micro, the author of Microwave. Hi.
Hello there, everyone.
And Marian Devecka, the author of Killerbot. Hi Marian, welcome back.
Hello. Nice to be back.
So, what were you up to lately? Question to you both. It's been a little bit quiet in the SSCIT scene in the last few weeks, I feel.
Well, I can start. I have not been programming anything for the last couple of months. Last week I was out traveling to Iceland and Vancouver. And this week the weather is too good to do anything inside.
Yeah, for myself, on the bot, I have not been progressing too much. I have now been trying to set up Open BW with BW API, and with my bot, something is not working at the moment, so I'm trying to figure that out. And as Micro said, the weather is now really, really good, so other activities have higher priorities.
You mean you go outside in the open spaces and everything?
Yeah, that's true. In the sun, bright sun, with sunglasses, of course.
This is an alien concept. All right. And any plans? What will you work on next besides Open API or Open BW?
So when I set this up, I would like to try to do some unit testing this way, or maybe even some learning, who knows. And yeah, I have just some rough plans for this year. Until BW5 is out. When BW5 is out, I would think I would write a new bot from scratch. Not that this bot is bad in design. It has been redesigned a few years ago. The code base is actually pretty good, but I have some ideas how I would design from scratch, and maybe have all three races in mind and do the code structure and modeling basically top level, something like that.
Did you build something in a way that you can't easily extend it, or it's just the one race thing?
Well, I have not thought it in my mind. So, for example, I have my own unit manager that manages everything that's going on with units and produces custom events. From that, I just basically take units, all the units that I see, and I store it somewhere, process that information, and on the next frame, I take all the units I see and compare the information to the previous frame and do something with that. And I have my own custom events for many actions. Also to compensate for some brute war stuff that is not entirely either correct or not so intuitive. So I have some timers there, things like that I will wait extended amount of frames before I consider that, for example, the unit is completed or building is completed, because when brute war says it's completed, it's not really completed. It's just morphing or something like that. And each race has its own stuff like this, and I've only tailored around the Zerg stuff. I also did not consider, like when building, that you need a powered by pylon or some stuff like that. I only consider creep, so stuff like that.
So you are programming more races now?
Not at the moment, but when BW5 is out and the integration will remastered, I had in mind that I would start from scratch, because there will be also some breaking changes, and it's a good opportunity to start building from scratch. It's not like I will not reuse stuff that I already have, but I have a different type of architecture in mind.
Sounds interesting, and yes, BW API just fucking lies to you all the time, so you can't trust it. Trust no one, not even your BW API.
Yeah, especially not BW API. Yeah, I have a lot of utilities and supporting functions and everything that basically I compute everything myself. I use information maybe from BW API, but I usually wrap it somehow. So, for example, when I check the range of, for example, a carrier, I return the range of a carrier that I would expect it to be, but normally a carrier does not have a range because it does not attack, so it would return, I think, 0, something like that. But that does break a lot of my computation, so it's better for me to return some number that makes sense and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff like this. Like if you check upgrades, it will only give you upgrades for yourself, but if you check for enemy, it might not think that enemy has already this upgrade, but I can infer through some stuff that's going on with a player that he might have this upgrade, or he already has this, and I will return the proper value for that upgrade. There's quite a lot of stuff like this.
And especially a carrier is a good example because it's doing everything in its own way. For example, the attack and leash range are vastly different, and if you read about the development of Brood War, basically carriers had custom code for everything they did.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's really not anything like any other unit. Most units just have either ground, air, or maybe both air and ground attack, and this one does not have any attack. It launches interceptors that go in a weird way, like behave like nothing else in the game. So yeah, I can imagine this is just some special code.
All right, let's switch to a new topic.
Well, sorry. I would
Sorry,
like to. I have some plans too that I would like to talk about. On top of my long list of items, I have a couple of builds I would like to test in the near future, especially one of those anti-cider builds with fast pool and hydra, and also some more macro-oriented builds, which is quite missing from the microwave at the moment. And other stuff I would like to do is I would like to do some opening detection, which is quite difficult, but I got a few ideas from the author of Purple Wave. He was really friendly to share some code that he's using.
Yeah, he does that.
Yeah, he does that a lot. And this ties into also I would like to do some changes to the learning, how the body's learning. Right now is only storing if it won or lost for the specific builds, but I also like to store which opening it used, the opponent used, and other data like map. And also I would like it to actually be able to read learning from the AI folder, so I can so it doesn't have to learn from scratch in the tournaments.
That's a tall order, but
yeah.
I wish you the best with it. It's certainly not impossible.
Well, yeah, we will see how long it will take. Probably I will skip the first tournament, and only will enter into Cider, no, not Cider, Ida in the fall.
And you mentioned unit testing, which raises an important point that how do you test complex features? Because basically the only way you can do it is just try it out in some game. And yeah, that might have side effects. So I don't know, I've been struggling with this a little because I have to build around so much mocks that it might be not worth it. So I don't know. Do you have something to add to this?
I don't think I'm doing anything really advanced. I'm just, if it's opening, I will of course just look at my openings and see how it's doing. But if it's specific units, I will have to follow a whole game and see how it uses the different units or groups of units or whatever I'm going to test. And that's a problem sometimes is if late game units like the Guardian, and yeah, you have to wait a long time before you'll beat those.
So until now, I have a folder where I have custom scenarios, which I create in the editor. I also sometimes play some triggers, but the triggers are kind of simple. You cannot mimic behavior like, for example, your opponent would do a kiting micro, something like that. So it's just some simple triggers like have your opponent attack here with a small force of zealots, which I give them, and I have sunken and I don't know 6 links, and my bot needs to micro them well in order that I basically survive this attack. So I have a bunch of these scenarios. I try to add them when I create a new feature. But problem is, how do you really evaluate it? Well, in this case, I would evaluate it that I have won the attack. Sometimes it's not so easy because I have a scenario, for example, when I want to engage some contain, and it might be more tricky to say that my bot really performs well because he might sacrifice send some units stupidly, and in the end maybe win, but there will be a lot of losses that as a player I would not do. So I oftentimes needed to watch the scenario played by itself. Also, there is a lot of randomness involved because all the cooldowns are random. There is kind of randomness in the positioning. And even if I win, for example, the first scenario with the zealots, I might not win it each time. There might be a 10 or 20% chance to lose because there was some small mispositioning or something like that. So, but I think if I set up the unit test in a more probabilistic way, it might at least help some way. And I also want to test how fast this actually will be, because if I have to watch with graphics and everything, it takes a lot of time. If this will be just some console output that it would be reasonably fast, it would be really cool. And also what I mentioned previously, that I would want to model a bot from scratch. This would also help in these scenarios because if you run with OpenBW and BW API, there is no computer, so not even the triggers will work, and the enemy unit will have no other than the automatic some defense mechanism. I don't know how they work, but there will be no AI controlling it. So I will need to model also like a very small bot for the opponent. And this is where I would like to really model something which is really simple, where I can build just some simple logic for the opponent, whether it's a Terran, Protoss, or Zerg.
So you basically have a map with different scenarios and triggers.
Yeah, there's a lot of different maps. I have maybe 50 of them at the moment. I don't know how many.
Wow.
There's a lot of them because, for example, if you test Mutalisk, then you have the first map I had was just one Mutalisk, and then there was a turret, and then there was a, I don't know, maybe a command center. And the first test was just the Mutalisk had to go around the turret to reach the command center, something like that, because it was in the way. A second scenario, maybe there was more of the turrets and you have to go more sophisticated way. Then there was a scenario where I had maybe 9 mutas and I watched if it engaged properly the turrets and maybe did not go into a territory when there was a stack of turrets or turrets with marines and bunkers and something like that. So you can basically incrementally build something on top of that.
So do you use triggers to add new units in a scenario?
Most of the time I use it just to execute some commands. So for example, I have an enemy army. I put, I don't know, let's say I put 12 Goliaths in the middle of the map, and I issue order to attack or attack move to my base. So basically, if, because there's a reason, it's a difference if a target is static and if it's moving towards you, then the mutas may not evade the attacks in the proper time, and you may take more hits. So I wanted to also test this specific scenario, or when you order the zealots to attack to your sunken line, things like that. Most of the time it's only attack, but I also did some special movement where you can basically order a unit to move from point A to point B, from point B to point C, and from point C to point A. Basically a patrol like in a triangle or rectangle. And then I would test, for example, if the mutas will chase the target properly. Some things like that. Or chase a probe by Zergling. That's also a good example.
Oh, that's pretty advanced and a lot of work, but I guess it's worth it in the end.
It's actually not so much work, because in these scenarios in the custom editor are pretty easy to create triggers for this. You just place some units and then you create the trigger attack here. And when the unit arrives here, you attack at a different place or something like that. And there is also a special trigger that says that's called preserve trigger, because normally in the editor, if a trigger is executed, it is disabled, but the preserve trigger will just say that it's enabled and can be executed again and again.
Well, I haven't actually played around with the editor, but I guess I should take some time to do that.
It's really simple compared to, let's say, Warcraft 3 or things like that. You can't really do exotic stuff with that. People actually had to create hacks for the for the triggers to modify memories in the Brood War to create some exotic stuff. So it was normally you can only create very simple conditions. But with the hack, there's some special editors, some that can do that, and you can create really like Mario inside the Brood War or something like that, which is normally not possible.
Brood War is one big hack, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see that every day. And that's some serious dedication, and I like the approach. But you still can only test versus the stock AI or yourself basically. But I guess you could set it up with Rope Launcher or something to use some other bots micro for those units. But that brings another set of its own problems.
well, being able to just add units of different kinds and watch how it does in micro is actually pretty cool, and pretty far in the unit testing area. But of course, you won't be testing it against other bots in that way.
Yeah, exactly. But if I would create a simple model for the opponent, and I don't think I would have like 20 of these. Maybe there will be only a few needed, because maybe we'll need a kiting micro, hit and run, and or maybe some special things for positioning or stuff like that. I don't think there will be that many opponent models for these tests.
Well, I don't know. Actually, this got me thinking, what if you could play different scenarios in an arena type engagement versus another bot? For example, you got 10 goons, enemy got 10 goons, and write a bot that wins that engagement.
Yeah, I would. That would be interesting for have a tournament like this. Actually, we used to have tournament micro tournaments for bots in the past. I don't know how many years is that. Maybe 3 years ago. It
Wasn't it
was.
they won the few first tournaments like 8 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. There was a few of them, and but I remember that they were only Protoss specific. It would be actually cool to have something like that. And there are micro dedicated maps that use a bunch of different units, and they are kind of balanced, even if it's not only Protoss versus Protoss. It can be Zerg units versus Protoss units, Terran, everything mixed. And yeah, and you could play one side, you can play the other side, so it's basically, it could be fair. Could be an interesting tournament.
That sounds interesting, and I would say I should suggest that instead of that tournament, how small you can make your bot, we
Yeah,
will have a micro tournament instead. That'd be more fun.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a concrete unit of work. I mean, developing a bot is kind of an open-ended task. You're never actually done with it. But
True.
but this kind of tournament is something that has an end to it. You can just say, okay, I don't know how to make this better from this point.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's a very small subtask from all the things that you can do, because you need in a large game you need to not only controller units, you need to manage your workers for mining minerals, you need to build buildings, you need to plan what to build, when to build, you need to know where to attack, when to attack. This is just the, maybe not a small subset, it's kind of a large part of the game, but if you focus on just one thing, that's kind of interesting, even maybe for new bot programmers who had not programmed a bot yet.
Yeah, that's true. It's a subset of the whole brute force programming, and actually microing is can sometimes win games, avoid the threats, and attack at the correct spots on the map. So it's really an important part of the game, and actually that's what you see also in pro gaming. The games are decided by microing, and that's actually also the case in many of the games for bots.
Yeah, and you have individual unit micro, like maybe controlling one unit, kiting back, for example, Dragon versus Zergling or Dragon versus Marine. But then you also have flanking, where you have a lot of Zerglings, and then you need to create a surround for when you attack, for example, Marines or something like that. And if you don't do it effectively, then the Marines win. And if you do it well, then you attack from each side. Your Zerglings can attack all at the same time, and you win that. There's a lot of different scenarios where you have clumped units, where you need to basically have space between units where you fight, for example, Muta plus Scourge versus Corsairs. It's a good example. You need to not have your units all clumped up, and the Corsairs will try to trick you, so you get into a bad position. Things like that.
True. Zerg relies really heavily on flanking the enemy. Actually, that's how Zerg should play, not just attacking from one side.
Yeah, our bots are not exactly very good at that. I think TSCMO was best as this, but I don't know if he's still working on his bot. I don't know what he's up to these days.
Yeah, he's doing those half moons circles. I don't know if that's what you would call flanking.
Yeah, that's closest as we probably can get to that. Yeah, we need flanking from multiple sides, and then also maybe getting ahead of a fleeing enemy and try to surround his units, because at the moment, for example, when you are fighting Locutus with Zerglings, your lings are pretty stupid, and if you could just as a human, you would move farther ahead of the fleeing dragon and try to surround him from multiple sides.
True. I haven't seen that done by any bots. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, maybe in the future we will.
Maybe with machine learning, it could be done.
Maybe with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so this kind of, let's call it arena maps, would be a great way to isolate and practice some kind of sub-problems. And I would very much like to see it, but yeah.
Also, machine learning is quite good at small sub-problems like microing circlings, for instance. So that would be like a problem that could be solved or could be done with machine learning, and actually quite fast too, because it's just a sub-problem of the whole game.
Yeah, we could easily create maybe just cut a small part of a bot that would be used as a tutorial bot for this, where you could apply directly either some rules or machine learning, and maybe this would attract new researchers in this field or new bot hobbyists who would like to do this kind of tasks.
They don't have to build a whole bot to actually being able to compete or to do anything in this.
Yeah,
I would love to have this kind of tournament. Unfortunately, I don't really have the time to organize anything like that, at least not in the near future. And also it would be a great niche for human versus bot play, if you think about it. I think many pro players would love the chance to practice their micro against specific units.
Oh, that's a good idea. Actually, bot versus human sub problems.
Yeah, exactly. I think this will work very well also.
That ties in a little to a new topic I wanted to mention. I don't know if you have listened to the last two podcasts, but we are planning a great human versus bot league.
No, I didn't. I haven't heard the last podcast, unfortunately.
So yeah, the basics of it is basically a league that you can play in online. You just click a button and it throws you into a game versus a bot you picked and the map you picked.
Yeah, I really like the idea. I think you and Hannes, is that right, are working on that?
Yes.
And so how is it going? Is it somewhere near completion?
it is going along, and I don't want to overpromise anything, but we are working on it. And yeah, you will know about it when it's done, but I don't want to drag it out. I want it to be done as soon as possible.
I
Okay.
really like the idea that you just basically push a button and choose a bot you want to play against, and that's basically it.
Yeah,
It's far too difficult as it is now to set it the whole setup that you need to do to make it work.
And the barrier of entry to playing versus bots cannot be overestimated. Is it underestimated? I don't know. So, however low you think the average user has this barrier, it can be lower because we are developers. We think we are vastly more technically adept, and like I said before, even editing files and clicking together relatively simple tasks is not trivial for someone who never done that. And that itself might scare some people away. And that's okay. I'm sure I'm pretty bad at other things, so it's okay to not be technically adept. I'm not saying that it's a problem. But yeah, the more user-friendly you make it, the larger audience you can reach with it. That's my philosophy on this.
I completely agree. I think anytime you need to edit some configuration file, whether it's an ini file or JSON or whatever file, you are basically only targeting technical people because normal user is not going to edit init files in Notepad or something like that. And if he misedits it, he's like, okay, it's not working. I'm done trying. We had some tutorials in the past. I think Nepeta made some on how to play versus bots, and actually some people were playing versus my bots, and that felt pretty good, especially people were really the feedback was positive because there were players who were scared to play, for example, on IC and because everyone would beat them, so they rather played versus my bot and trained them to have a better micro, because at first, of course, even my bot was beating them pretty badly, but then they managed to win some games versus my bot, and I got a feedback that then after that they were managed to beat some players on the IC Cup. So that's really great, and this is something we should also strive for.
Yeah, that was a big success. I think Ratio has done a installer with his bot, so people can just install it. But I don't know how if it's just that easy with his bots.
Yeah, and if someone non-technical goes through the tutorial and someone is not working, he will probably just give up because he's not in the debugging mindset as we are. And yeah, so eliminate the possibility to to fail. That should be the goal.
So
I really approve that work. That's really cool.
Yeah, even for myself, I really don't like stuff like configurations and installments. I have trained myself to do that. I can do it now, but I don't really like it. I prefer to do programming and or doing stuff, other things than configuring ini files or stuff like that. So I can really relate to other people who don't even have this background like I have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you can just push a button and you have set up your environment and you can play any bots, that's super cool. And I would use that too, even as a developer. I would also just want to spend my time on actual programming and not setting stuff up. I was a bit worried when I started setting up this StarCraft Docker thing, but I just followed the instructions carefully and it worked out of the box. But it's still a bit scaring to download stuff, and use the terminal to install the stuff because you have no idea if it would be working in my environment on my computer.
Yeah, and if we have this, what do you call it? What would be the name of that software?
Yeah, we didn't have a good name yet. The current best is StarCraft Artificial Violence League, but that leaves something to be desired. So
I guess that's the name of the league, but not the software that you will be using. Oh, will it?
Yeah, I think we should not use violence in the name because that would be not maybe good for the search engines.
Yeah.
But whatever name we decide to give it, we should then really give some marketing to that, like put it on Team Liquid or wherever, whatever channels, maybe the Pylon show, so that people really can massively try that out. I think
True.
it would be really great.
Let's have a name competition on Discord.
yeah. Yeah, I feel that will go the opposite way.
No, you will never know.
But yeah, you never know. And currently we really don't have a good one. But that will be solved. I think that's the easiest things to solve here.
So how was the progress on this?
The basics, I mean, connecting the remote game server is working. So the possibility to have this is verified. We have a proof of concept. There are a lot of boring side work like user management and coordinating games and keeping score and etc., which needs to be done. I did some planning and research on that, but relatively little implementation.
Will it be based on StarCraft Docker or something else?
Partially, I think. That part is managed by Hannes. That's the game server and the creating of the instances, and that's written in C++ mostly. And there will be the other part, the client and the coordinator type thing, which will be written in Java. Mostly because that's my expertise. I write similar software on a daily basis, so I think I can do it relatively quickly. Other than that, there are no serious considerations about picking the language or anything. But I just intend to pick something that works, some technology from the market that's proven. So technically speaking, we are not doing anything really advanced, although the game server's netcode was brand new and Hannes did a great work with it.
But I guess we're using the StarCraft as like a backend and Java with the front end or whatever you call it. I guess you can hit more platforms like Windows, Mac, and Linux, I guess.
Currently, I'm only planning it for Windows. I think there are very, very few people who play on Linux or Mac StarCraft 1.16. But yeah, if we use Java, then that's probably an easier problem to solve. But first, let's get working it on Windows. And that begs the question, what should be the map pool for it? I wanted to talk about maps in general, and I think for the first step I just grab the map pool from SSCIT, then extend from that.
Yeah, sure, I would exactly do that because that map pool is working currently for the bots, for basically all of them. And you could basically have the standard, and then there could be either that player could choose any other map or a list of all other maps, but just these, how many is that, 12 or I don't know, maps would
16,
be that,
I think.
okay, 16. So this will be recommended maps. So they in the I don't know, list box or whatever, they will be highlighted green and everything will be highlighted gray or something like that.
There should be some kind of settings that which map pool that the bot will support, because if they're not using like the supporter maps, the bot might do something strange or just crash if it hasn't been tested properly.
Yes, the way I intend to do this, if you upload your bot, you have to specify which maps it works on. So when the player picks the bot and the map, he will only see the allowed maps for it. So that solves the backwards compatibility issue. If I just upload a new map, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, that's cool. We also talk about that on Discord about new map pools for SSAT and Basel, the Basel ladder.
Antigua always keeps the latest pro map pool in AIST, and I think that's a good thing, because this has to evolve at some point. I mean, the maps are tried and tested, and there are a lot of other things that can be done before migrating to new maps, but still that's an aspect of the game I feel we should progress on.
But the problem with this that new players and also like pro players, they you know, the lower level of players, if they're playing on the Brute War network, they're playing against the new maps, the new map pool they're releasing like every 1 year or whatever. And if you don't support those map pool, we might be hitting our foot, so to speak.
Oh yeah, it's a continuous adaptation thing. So, do you have any questions about the project? Because I'd love to answer those in the cast.
Okay, so this will be some service-based thing, or what kind of architecture is that?
The planned architecture is you basically download the launcher, press a button and play. That's it from client side.
And for the developers, you will be uploading your bot to a specific like web page.
I think so. Yes,
handled?
I think so. I don't know yet, but that would be the easiest option. But for the testing stage, probably anyone can upload a bot. But after a while, I'd like to have some quality control on the bot. So maybe there will be a test phase, or I will say that, okay, I need, I don't know, 100 or 1000 games without crashing. And after that, you can enable your bot in the ladder. I don't know what will be the specifics of that, but I don't want to have potato bots on this.
But it will be totally separate from Basel and SSCAT.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, there should be some kind of testing of the bot. There shouldn't be crashing if it's a new bot or something. So we still need someone to take care of that part. So
I mean, Bazel is pretty good for that purpose, I think, and to a degree, Bazel already does that and disables bots that crash a lot. So I will talk with Bytekeeper, and maybe we have some passive integration. Or
yeah, for current bots and on the ladder, of course, but for new bots which might not be on Basel or SSCAT, you still need to do that kind of work.
Oh yeah, I don't know yet.
Or maybe you could set up as a requirement that it should be working. It should be able to run on Basel.
That I can do, or I can just run something like Bazel locally. And if you run headless, you can run games very quickly. So
yeah,
I can just say, okay, on my server you need to have, I don't know, 1000 games, and if you didn't crash, okay, your bot is enabled.
True, you can set up a system that just take these new bots and just test them locally in a StarCraft Docker environment.
Yeah,
That's
basically
true.
a continuous integration for
Yeah,
bots.
and then so that's
Yeah, sounds good.
I haven't been reading Discords for while I'm on vacation, but I'm looking forward to read more about this and how it will progress. It really it sounds promising if we can finish it.
Yeah, I fully intend to.
So are you the developer of the front ends in Java,
Yes, currently.
and Hannes will be doing the like the back end work.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
Let's currently we are the only two people on the project, but of course we accept any kind of help, but by no means we require it. So I started this out with the intent that if I need to, I will do this alone. Maybe it will take a longer time, but I will do this, and that's still my philosophy.
Great.
Will you be writing a blog about it while programming it?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, that hasn't crossed my mind, but it should be obvious since I'm blogging about my bot development in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the answer is I should do that.
Cool. More content for your website
Oh yeah,
and podcasts.
yeah. I think if it launches, then I will have an abundance of topics on this podcast. Not that I'm struggling with finding topics anyway, but yes, that will be a whole other thing.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
All right. Speaking of maps, I was just watching some pro matches, not bot matches, but human matches, and it feels to me that some maps are more advantageous to some races. Do you feel that's true in bot versus bot games?
So of course there is some balance, but it may be different than that. What's for pro players? It might be even different for different levels of players. When two noobs of same level play on a map that would be maybe favored for Zerg on pro level, it might not be the same on the newbie level. It might be different on the mid level also. And the same thing applies, I think, for the bots, that the balance that the pro player says this map is favors Zerg. In the bot land, it might be that Protoss is favored here.
But it still requires that the bots are actually using the features, the specific features of the maps that are good to use for the specific races. And I don't think that all bots are doing that. Maybe the top 5, 6, 10 bots are actually programming specific for specific features on the map, I guess. And I don't think it's really widely used yet.
Yeah, well, in general, for example, you can take features for maps like very open maps with long distances are usually really good for Zerg because they are the fastest, and things like many chokes or bridges, things like that are really good for Terran. Some of these features are matchup dependent. It might be that, for example, it's good for Terran versus Protoss, but it's also good for Protoss versus Zerg. So there's a lot of features for the map, but since our bots don't understand the meaning of bridges or chokes or walls that well, so this is not playing for them at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. You're correct that some of the features are like general for all races. But I think if you look at right now, basically it's not working. But you could, if you look at the map stats for my bot microwave, there are some maps that it plays better on than others. So them, and that could of course be partly due to the race, but also partly due to that I'm not using the specific features on those maps that I should do to better on those maps.
Yeah, right. This
So like
also true.
some of the maps are really good for turns. They can do tank drops and where they can shoot down on the bases, and some bots do that. But I'm not, like you said,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that the bots are actually aware of those features. That okay, I should go on to this place with my tank and so on. That
exactly.
they're actually not aware of the features. Very few of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask Nepeta about high ground usage.
The same could be also, for example, for mutualist harassment. Not many bots are doing that, and even my bot is not using map-specific information. Like on this map, it is good to, I don't know, attack an extractor from this position because the run has no good way to defend that. I don't use information like that. It's just random if my bot decides to do that kind of action.
Is it random or is it?
Now the pathing is basically my bot tries to get into the opponent's main or to some other expansion if scouted, and the only priorities are, I think, Armory has a higher priority, but other than that, it tries to just find any target for it. So the movement is kind of random in its sense. It just tries to avoid damage, and it's attracted by command centers and armories. So yeah, that's it.
Command centers are sexy after all.
But yeah, they are important. So so there's not really random movement to the command
Yeah,
center.
it wants to actually kill the workers, not the command centers. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good idea. Good.
My stance on this is terrain utilization, high ground, and hiding behind trees should be a priority because it's a free advantage. You don't have to spend any minerals on it. You just have to spend your programming skills on it, and it gives you an edge without spending any in-game resource, or just spending your resources better. And by resources, I mean your actions and your actions.
You are true. In programming, you see that with the new map Blackout, was it? I think they had these trees in the middle, arrows with trees where you could have very low visibility, so you could basically hide your lurkers there and do bad stuff to the Marines. And also, but we still have those low and high grounds where you could put lurkers on it, and well, of course it's some work to make the lurkers know that okay, I want to stay here and on the high grounds and to kill those Marines. It still does take time to program that stuff. I think
Of course,
it's not really an easy task.
Yeah, of course, programming this is harder than your usual bot programming, I feel.
Yeah, I think it is.
So is it not like if high ground and you can burrow lurkers here, do burrow, that kind of code in your bot?
Yeah, well, I guess you could do something like, okay, I want to my units want to stay, and let's bury my lurker on high ground, find the nearest high grounds if it's nearby where I want to put my units. Of course, that could be done easily.
Yeah, of course, it's not that simple. I'm just
It's not
joking.
always. Yeah.
But I think the best skill that I could imagine bots could do at the moment is understanding bridges and chokes. I think these two have really, really high importance because your units get stuck on the choke. You can have sometimes even twice the army than your opponent. If your opponent understands what choke means or bridge means, he can win very, very disadvantageous battles.
Yeah.
Also, you need to move in a different way, especially if you have close range units or melee units, where you basically need to somehow program your units where they are on the choke, and there is a ton of other units behind them that they need to try to move forward, regardless if they can attack a target or not. So
yeah, not many pubs actually moving their units in the right order through chokes, so they block each other sometimes.
Yeah, even my bot does that, so it's another really easy problem. I have some ideas how I could solve this, but it's not an easy problem.
So it's not just pathfinding, but group pathfinding, and not just
Exactly.
group pathfinding, but group pathfinding where you have to be aware of the terrain around you.
So haven't you wrote something about this on your blog actually?
Yeah, that's just planning. The way I imagine that will work is I know what path my units will take. I know their speed. Therefore, I can calculate in which frame where they will be. I can exclude those frames from other units' movements, so I can just go around them. So it's some kind of 2 or 3-dimensional calculation. So if I know from about every unit where they are at which frame, then theoretically I can avoid collisions. Now, of course, this will not be that easy.
Well,
Yeah,
it sounded
especially
easy.
yeah, especially it will probably take a lot of computational power, right? With large armies.
Yes and no, I think, because this is something you can just cache. So the problem is with computing power, I feel, is we are limited with calls to the API. But just calculating stuff in our own machine is relatively fast. I mean, we are speaking about a 20-year-old game, and the current computers' capabilities are just vastly superior. I could play StarCraft on my phone if I wanted to, but the API is the bottleneck here.
I would say it wouldn't take much CPU time doing those calculations compared to your normal pathfinding algorithms that you showcased on your blog.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. And also another big problem is, which I'm just discovering now, is your units are of a different size. And even if you have a pet, it might be too narrow for an Ultralisk, for example. And the Ultralisk might get some tank shots, which is not preferable.
Locatus is doing is calculating pathing depending on the unit sizes. I tried to do that too, but I felt that my programming wasn't good enough, so I disabled it again.
Well, you're not Dan. You're
Yeah.
just Dan-ish.
But I will definitely do that kind of pathing, so I can play on maps where you have like small chokes where big fat units can't go through, and they should go around. We had this map in the last SCIG, I think. I can't remember the map name. But I was doing the programming for that competition specifically because I wanted my map bot to actually to play on it on those maps.
So when you calculate the paths, you use walk tiles, right? And do you somehow limit how far you compute the path? Like only, I don't know, 20 walk tiles? How do you?
Walk positions, and yes and no. The basic version of the pathfinding is just doing it in all the map, but now I'm working on in-area pathfinding. I take the areas from BWEM and with some extension and enhancing of that. Based on the area codes, I only run the in-area pathfindings. So, and that proved to be very useful and sped up the pathfinding greatly, because I'm just first BWEM is pretty fast if you just ask it for a path, and it gives you choke points, and I just need to calculate the paths between choke points. It's still not that fast if I do it across the map, but it's a vast improvement over just doing it blindly.
Also, you don't have to do that for every single unit. If your units are grouped into groups, you only need to do that calculation for that group alone. So like once for a frame, and then you might have different units, unit groups.
Yeah, you can.
So you don't have to do it like 20 or 30 times or 50 times a frame. You don't have to do it maximum 5, I think it is, each frame.
Yeah, the path is valid for, I don't know, 20 frames at least, and
also that
similar units can just use the same path with a little delay. Yeah, that's true. And I'm currently can do around 15 path finds in a worst case scenario per frame, which I think is a pretty good number, and I can work with that.
So, but that's only for path calculations, or is your bot also doing other calculations?
That's just if my bot only doing path calculations, but I don't do anything else that is resource intensive, I think.
Yeah.
But 15 in Java means maybe 50 in C++.
Yeah, true. But I don't think you need 50 each frame anyway.
I honestly don't know, because I'm using an array-based approach, and that's pretty fast even compared to C++. And of course, there are always micro optimizations. You can do bit shifts, or I don't fucking know what, but after a while it just becomes how would I say it, self-centered, or not really meaningful.
Yeah, Hannes would say something here now if he would be, but I don't have any measurements. But usually in these higher languages, when you do even a single read or write, the higher language has to do at least 2 or maybe even sometimes 3 writes at the same time. But
yeah, generally that's true. Actually, Hannes would have been the third guest, but he's sick, so we wish him to be better.
Yeah. Become well again, Hannes.
But he's here in spirit.
He is in our hearts.
Get well soon.
Okay, so another question, which is a little bit off topic here, but I've been playing with the thought. Human leagues tend to have different leagues, sorry for the repetition, for a different level of players. For example, in basically every online ladder you have platinum, gold, bronze, silver, wooden, aluminum, whatever leagues, and they are separated by player ability and such. I'm thinking maybe that's an approach we could take with bots as well. Maybe not at this point, because there are maybe 50 bots total, but I'm starting to feel that the top 10 bots are playing a vastly different game than the rest, and they beat the bottom third every time, all the time. So it's maybe just a waste of computing power to compare them. What do you think of this concept?
There's already been a lot of discussions a few times on Discord about this, and I've always been positive about the idea to divide the ladders up in different leagues, And as you say, if you have like a starter league, all the new bots will have a easier time to actually get some wins against each other, and they can compare each other bots more much better. So I definitely think we should try to work toward that goal somehow. I'm not sure that it will be possible on SSCAT, but I think it could be done in Basel or some new league where we have divided it up in different.
Yeah, I think it would benefit the bots, but I'm not partial to the idea very much. I just brought it up as a conversation point.
It's an interesting discussion, at least because from one side you want to motivate new players to be able to join this kind of ladders, but maybe their bots are not so good. So the games like the last SSCIT had kind of a lot of potato games because maybe even half of the bots were not very good, and the other half was like another level or maybe two levels above them. So there was this giant cliff in that situation. It would be really better if there was two separate leagues where only the top, I don't know, 40 bots would be in one league, and the other would have some other league. But at this point, since we have really low inflow of new bots, it's maybe a bridge to cross in the future. Yeah. Another thing for the SSCIT, maybe for that kind of tournament, group stages would make it better, where this basically the low level bots will get filtered out, but it's named still Student StarCraft artificial intelligence, which means that it's mainly for new people who want to test their AIs with their new approaches for machine learning and whatnot. So these bots maybe which are created maybe in one semester or something, we cannot compete with the top bots. So maybe a different tournament would be more for this.
Yeah, I think so too. I tend to be on this opinion because it's a student StarCraft AI tournament, and it's serving that purpose very well, and it should serve that. And speaking from experience, a semester is not really enough if you're a beginner to write a reasonably competitive bot, and that's okay. But there should be a place for students to try themselves out and maybe not get discouraged by bots that has been developed from 10 years stomping them into the ground.
So tournament type that would be really challenging and competitive. What I had in my mind would be something like you would start with all the bots, and after some period of time, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, these bots will just play games each basically so that the counts are balanced. So I play the same amount of game versus all of the bots. And after this period of time is over, then half of the bots will drop out, and the other bot authors who passed this period can update their bots, and then will be another phase like this, and another. It would be very interesting thing, but we would need to have a really dynamic community full of active bot developers for this to work.
That's how I guess that the StarCraft 2 tournament is doing. They have seasons, so they have like a interval of time where you play, you make new updates to your bot, and then you play this like I don't know 2 months or something, and then they stop the tournament, and then they the winner, and then we make a new season. I don't know if they have leagues for new bots and another league for the best bots, but I guess it demands more work for the people that runs the tournaments if you want to do it like this.
It sure does.
Yeah, but we are speaking about wishes now, so one can dream, and maybe not disqualify the bots, just put them into a lower league, like okay, you're now silver division or whatever.
Well, that's how the StarCraft ladder is doing.
Yeah, exactly.
You start in the bottom and you work your way up. I don't know if you actually change to the next level during a season, or if you're only doing these between the seasons in the StarCraft ladder. I haven't played it, so I don't know.
Okay, and last great topic for today. It's prepared some Zerg-specific questions. I'm curious as a Zerg bot author, but I think it would benefit everyone to hear your thoughts on this. So basically, I'd like to talk about what your bots can't do as a Zerg. I know that's revealing some competitive advantage, but come on, let's talk about this.
So what our bot cannot do?
Yes, cannot do.
I'll get my list.
Do you want to confess first, or should I ask the questions?
So I will say something that comes up to my mind, and yeah. So I cannot use defilers, any of their spells. I cannot use Scourge. I cannot use drops. My units behave independently, so I don't form unit groups. It has some advantages and some disadvantages. I'm currently thinking of if and how to restructure this, and yeah. My bot does not understand the choke points, the bridges, the map specifics. Yeah, things
Surrounds.
like that. Surrounds, of course. Yeah, my bot cannot do surrounds. It can do them by accident.
Like retrieving from a far away base back
yeah,
home.
because my bot
actually just surrounding the enemy units.
Yes, because if I have as a Zerg, you basically have if you are successful, then you have hatcheries all over the place. So you basically naturally can do this kind of stuff if you have a combat evaluator or simulator or something like that.
Yeah, or if you like mine, I have a scouting group that goes around the map and scouts for enemy bases, and it could actually accidentally meet my main army where the enemy is surrounded in that way.
Yeah, and does it understand that it now can attack
Really.
with your main?
Well, it understands. It has its own attack mechanic. So if it has enough power together with my main army, it will attack.
So
from both sides. So
does it join together to one group, or is it still?
No, it's still two groups, but they will attack the same enemy. Depending on how big power the enemy is.
Would it be possible for it to bug out so that it would compute that you have enough power, but only one group will attack and the scouting group would go somewhere else?
Depends on how many enemy units are nearby the two groups. They could attack differently. depending on how the how the units are placed.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure if it would work properly. I'm not sure. It will be randomly, I guess. So for my bot, it doesn't do surrounds on purpose. It doesn't use defilers. It doesn't use queens, and it doesn't use burrow. I've been thinking about that to implement that many times, but haven't had time for it. And it doesn't do overload drops. Yeah, and it doesn't really use its overloads in a proper way for scouting and what you normally you do as a Zerg. They tend to just run into the enemy and getting killed all the time.
That's actually one of the points I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
I titled it Tactical Overlord Usage. Basically, the Overlord is one of the only units that you can have an infinite number of.
What? You can?
Well, as long as you have resources, but there is no supply limit on them. I think
that's
the
true.
only other unit it's similar is the Spider Mine, or correct me if I'm wrong. And that opens up some tactical possibilities. Most prominently scouting, of course, but I've been thinking about how to use overlords to their maximum potential. And drops are, of course, one thing, but using overlords as just a taxi can be advantageous in some ways. And I began to draft out some algorithms to ferry units into the high ground if they were going that way anyway by overlord. So faster map movement for your army, maybe. Do you think
that should be for defilers because they're quite slow?
Yeah.
If you want the defiler in front, far away from your own base, you could use the overlord as like a taxi.
Yeah, you don't want to push your army through the choke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
This is a drop, actually, a drop implementation, or is it something different?
Yes and no. For example, you have an arrow choke, you want to get your army through, and you know that with the proper way they will get slower. But you see that, okay, that Zergling wants to get up to the high ground, then go its merry way, and there is an overlord nearby. Let's just call a taxi, put it in the high ground, and the overlord goes one way, the Zergling the other. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, when the defilers go through the choke, it will just block everything. So you could, because it's a slow unit, you could ferry, taxi the defilers in the overlord and have the Zerglings go through the choke.
I mean, the Zergling is faster than an overlord by default. But if it wants to go up a ledge, then it must go around, and the overlord does not have to. So it goes an overlord if it's quicker that way. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's also good users.
So I think for defilers and ultralisk, this would be kind of very good, and maybe also lurkers. But for Zerglings, not so much, because the unloading time will be kind of slow, because you need to unload one by one.
But I mean, ultralisk are quite fast, aren't they? And you can't have as many in the overlords as other units.
Yeah, but they are clunky. They are big. They basically, if you go through the choke, they.
Yeah, that's true. If you want to go through a choke, yeah.
And you can unload them fast because there's only two of them. While
or escaping with workers. For example, if zealots attack your base, then you just pick up your workers to an overlord and they can't hurt them anymore.
Yeah, that would be great in a distant main, especially where you cannot escape through the land, because my drones actually have escape mechanic implemented, and it works kind of good in most cases, but this would be actually useful.
Yeah, because most Protoss and Terran tend to have land-based armies mostly. I mean, no strong anti-air in most cases, and yeah, you can just get away with this.
Another usage would be, if you don't have Mutalisk, is to use the Overlords to rewatch on the high grounds. So your combat simulator or estimator better knows about the enemy units.
Yeah,
So he could
scouting
like poke into the base and back again.
scouting
Hopefully
advantage
without getting killed.
scouting advantage cannot be
Yeah.
overestimated.
But I guess also Bury is one of those features that are not being reused very much in bots. I guess a few bots are actually using the Burrow, except of course for lurkers, which has it already. But the Burrow that you research for, like, yeah, you could use it for burrowing links for scouting around the map, like Terrans are using spider mines. You could use it to block a base expansion.
Or just
Uh,
hide with a defiler. Yeah, the last thing we talked about was Burrow, and I think just you mentioned that defilers are quite slow, but it can see the threat and just burrow away and hide from the enemy. That could be a tactical usage of
Yeah,
Burrow.
that's true. You could use burrow on the defiler because it's slow, yeah. And also you could burrow your drones when you are under attack if it's not Protoss using Storm, they get hit anyway. So if it's Dragoons and Zealots, you could just burrow the drones nearby so they're not getting hit, killed.
Yeah, also irradiate does not damage burrowed units.
Oh,
I think it does.
Only the main unit, not the splash.
Oh yes, no splash damage. That's true.
And also one more thing that is useful is you can burrow hydralisks and catch drops or corsairs or something like that is incoming into your base.
yeah.
Quite a lot of
Burrow
possibilities.
was used a lot in the last pro tournament season.
Yeah, I'm still behind the pro league. I'm getting almost half year behind, so I need to review.
Yeah, but it was in the last Africa season. I think Burrow was used a lot by Zergs, of course. And it hasn't been. I have been watching the last 3-4 seasons, pro game seasons, and it wasn't used that much before actually, but now it was in the last season. It was actually amazing.
I'm looking forward to watch that.
Okay, two more Zergy topics, then I have a big announcement, actually two. The first Zerg topic is larva management. Antiga mentioned some casts ago that he thinks that Zerglings are actually expensive units because they cost larva. And larva management is something that a lot of Zerg players don't do properly. What do you have in this area?
So he thinks that Zerglings are expensive.
Yeah, because they occupy larva, which you have very few of. Maybe especially in the late game when you have to retrain your army quickly, and other races can outproduce you in some cases.
I guess that they're really useful in the early game and in the real late game. In the early game, they are the main unit. That's the only unit you can make, of course. And then later in the late game, where you have research attack for circling.
My question is not about the Zergling, but
Okay.
larva usage mostly.
Larva usage.
How do you handle larva in your
Well,
bots?
I actually just changed how they use it. I search for a hatchery with the lowest amount of larvas and the most amount of larvas, and use that hatch to make my unit. So a change from before, where I just took the first.
You mean highest number of larvae?
Yeah, the higher amount of larvas. Yeah. True.
Yeah. So I use that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that you avoid burning lava.
I use that too, and also there is this larva timer, which can be further used to if you have two hatcheries with two larvas, then you can also check if the larva timer is. I don't know if it counts down. I think it counts down. Then you take the one which has the lower larva timer. And I also try to do stuff like not build. Not use larvas on expansions that are under enemy threat, like under vulture attacks, and this can also backfire in a rush situation. When I had a bug where my bot refused to build Zerglings when there is a marine or bunker rush. I still think there is something like that in my bot. So yeah, things like that. And back to the Antigas point, I think what he meant by the larvas are expensive, it's especially in the early game where you had to choose, because if you have 12 drones and 6 Zerglings, it's kind of different if you would have 0 Zerglings and 15 drones. That's a big advantage economically. But you could straight away die if there comes one zealot or 2 zealot. You may lose 5 drones maybe, or something like that. So you need to basically have the least amount of Zerglings if you do not decide to go all in, where you may decide your opponent does not have any defense, so let's build all in Zerglings and punish him for that. But Zerg economy is early game is mostly about having the least amount of defense and the highest amount of drones. And the least amount of defense could be Zerglings, but it could be also Sunkens. The math is actually kind of sophisticated, because one Sunken is one drone plus 75 minerals plus 50 minerals for upgrade. So it's a total of 175 minerals you count the drone in. But so you could have 6 Zerglings, and 6 Zerglings which are micro properly are usually better than the Sunken, unless you're fighting a group of a large group of Marines, for example, or something like that.
Or large group of sealers even.
Yeah, and but on the other hand, by creating a Sunken, you don't waste larva. So you could have one Sunken and 3 extra drones. One is lost, so just 2 extra drones. So it's a kind of funny math where you have a low amount of hatcheries. Maybe Sunkens are sometimes better. It's really depends. And also SimCity placement, your building placement plays a large role here, because you can if you build your base really well, is usually the natural or even the second expansion if you're playing versus fast expansion Protoss. If you have your building placed really well and your unit placed really well, you need much less units and much less Sunken than you would need normally. So this is also something many bots, including mine, although I have a little bit of SimCity, but it's far from perfect and far from being reliable. That can affect the gameplay a lot, because I could have, if I had my SimCity perfectly, I could have on average maybe 5 drones more each game.
Yeah, that's true. SimCity is important if you encounter rush processors or Terrans. But I mean, pro gamers are rarely building many sunkens. Only if they actually try to do a what's called a 4-base turtle style thing with 2 main bases and 2 naturals.
Yeah, that's correct. It seems to be coming in and out of fashion. Like even in ZVT, we sometimes see a Masunken style, like it was the Larva versus Nada, the famous game with the nuclear launch.
Yeah, that's true. That
And
was fun game.
yeah, that was really cool. But most of the time, players try to stay maximum on the units and have just maybe like one sunken or something like that, so that if the enemy does not have enough defenses, they can easily launch a counterattack.
And the other situation where you actually build sunkens, 2 or 3 sunkens, is against Terrans, against marine attack. What's called this?
Yeah, Marine
SK
Rush is
Terran.
5 Rex or
Yeah, they have this. I can't remember what it's called, but you build 2 or 3 sunkens when the Terran has makes its push out with the Terran with his marines. You see that all the time in pro gaming.
Yeah, because basically Zerg on the Hatcher level, before he has the Mutalisk or Lurkers, all of the basic units are pretty bad at fighting Marines, medics with steam and range, because they are not really cost efficient. You can try, and I've seen it in the games recently. Maybe it's even more prevalent now since I'm behind in watching. Players try to defend with mass Zerglings early on versus some small groups of Marines attacking off timing.
Yeah, I've seen it done, and it really works.
Yeah, because it's. I think you will need to have a really good flank from maybe close to 360 degree to really make it. Maybe Burrow will also help in this situation when you can plan where the enemy can go, but how reliable is that? Veteran may just had the ProSense and scan there, and then it's all gone, or just walk a different route. Yeah.
But I guess that Burrow also costs something to do to research, and so I guess it's a gamble.
Yeah, it's kind of expensive. If I would balance, if I would have some say to balance the game, I would maybe lower the cost to 50-50 from 100-100, because 100-100 is almost layer tech research, which is far more precious.
Yeah, but everything you said about making circlings early on is true. You only make the circlings if you need them, and well, I plan to implement that. I have some openings that doesn't make many circlings, and in those cases it will help if it can make some circlings if it needs it instead of a drone, or as an add-on doing the main opening that I have.
So I had I don't know, before my first bot, and I think at the beginning of my after the first big refactoring, my bot was all for Zerglings in ZVP. He would try to match the count of Zealots with Zerglings. That would be always very low on drones. And now I changed the tactic to have to build Sunkens instead. I don't think either has its weakness, because my Zerglings were really stupid versus dragons, and now we have these locutus and forks and spoons.
It only works until a certain degree. If the process gets a lot of sealers, you will still die to that.
And
You need Zongans to defend against sealers unless you have really good micro.
Yeah, and I don't do the flanks. So yeah, this is kind of
that's why we need flanking.
Yeah, we need a better Zergling micro.
Definitely.
And Hydralisk too.
Well, we have gone on a tangent about this, I think. Last Zerg question, and then the announcement time. So, Zerg versus Zerg. I've been thinking about some in-game enemy in-base cheese when you use the enemy creep to place down buildings, and maybe just an in-base sunken, and then you kill all their drones. Do you do anything like that?
No cheese, not that kind of cheese anyway.
Maybe you can even do that with a drop.
So I don't do any cheese. My bot is a serious bot.
Not even rushes. Well, something that rushes like 5 or 4 police.
I could easily code that into my bot, and actually my first bot, like many Zergs, I started with a 5 pool, but that is a really long time ago, and I could code that kind of easy.
It should be one of the standard builds in your Zerg. You really need fast pool and you need like micro openings, so you confuse your opponents.
So I only focus on the macro openings because I want to get them right. If I basically have a switch that, I don't know, 50% of time or maybe less, 25% of time I use the 5 pool or some rush pool, then that means that the 25% of the games are not useful for me to learn anything new for my bot. So I rather focus on having the macro builds right. But I'm also not confident with my Zergling micro, and it would also not work for the 5 pool versus more sophisticated players like Saida and Crazy. I think their Marian early game Marian Marian SCV micro is really good, and my Zerg rushes will not work versus them. But back to the original question with the sunken in enemy main, this rush is actually very valid and kind of powerful. At least it would, in the bot lanes, it would be very powerful when you would go maybe 5 pool, maybe 4 pool. I don't know the number. Maybe some higher number, so that you could rush Zerglings early and also take a drone to build a sunken. It would probably not be a 4 pool; it would be some higher number pool. But this kind of rush would be very efficient, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. And now that I think about it, I think that Dan and McRae do it because I've heard it here.
Do they do it?
No, I think they will do it because they heard about it now.
Every cheese.
I have no idea if it'd be effective. I don't have any experience with proxying at all.
I remember we used to do that in human versus human matches, especially in 2v2. It was really popular, and I think in 1v1 is also possible. Maybe not in pro games so much, where they can micro their drones very well, but otherwise, I think it really has a potential.
Unfortunately, I haven't played that much, and definitely haven't played proxy games at all, or been playing against it.
Maybe every cheese will be done by Dan at some point. Every cheese has that fate.
Yeah, but I plan to do some kind of proxying, and at that time, I guess I can try it and see if it will work.
All right. So the much promised announcements now. The first I just thought of. I promised to buy a pizza whoever comes up with the best name for the Human versus Bot League. Any pizza that he or she wants. And the second one, it is actually a big one. I've been asked to take on the role that Nepeta fulfilled so far and cast games on the SSEIT Twitch and YouTube channel. This is a great honor, to be honest, and I will try to do my best to follow Nepeta's footsteps. The way it will work is every 2 weeks I will provide a cast, and every other week it will be Nepeta's turn. I think this will benefit both of us, and I'm looking forward to my first opportunity to do that, which will be, if everything goes well, next Saturday, meaning the 28th of April. And yeah, you heard it. You heard it here first.
You will get famous.
Sorry?
You will become famous.
Oh yes, I
big Brood War star.
Can't wait for all the fame and money it will bring. And with that, this has been a very long cast, so I'd like to conclude it now. And thank you very much for being here. It has been an awesome cast and filled with many Zerg joyous things. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, consider subscribing to the RSS feed or the mailing list. If you would like to support me or the podcast, check out my shop for some cool items. Link will be in the description.